Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. My name is Stephanie Dunham.
I'm Evelyn Mason.
And I'm Rochelle Knapp.
And we're finally back to recording.
Yay!
Yeah. I was out for surgery. I had a abdominal reconstruction done because I had a gigantic hernia that I'm waiting on my prize for. The doctor told me that I had the third or fourth biggest hernia that he's repaired with his robot. And I'm like, where's my plaque?
Such an overachiever.
Yeah. You know me. Anyway, yeah, so we're back and we're finally recording again, and hopefully there won't be any major life things that come up and interrupt us again. But we are thankful that we have an audience and people who want to hear what we have to say. So thank you for being patient. Also, I just want to say that we are now regularly putting out safety tip reels based off of the ideas that we talk about in this podcast and just in general self-defense training that we've had, martial arts training. You can find it on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. I think those are the four.
On Twitter too.
Well,
Or,
X.
Yes, on X,
Yeah.
which is X Twitter. See what I did there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Anyway, we're spreading the joy and hoping that you guys will share safety tips. We don't get anything out of it. So it's just about caring about our audience, caring about others, and wanting people to stop and think about habits that they've created that create dangerous situations. I've heard the term hypervigilance applied to something like we're talking about, and I think I have to disagree. I would say it's vigilance,
Right.
Yeah.
not hypervigilance. Hypervigilance to me would be something like never leaving your house
Right.
because you don't feel
Right.
safe.
It's more like a trauma response. That's not healthy.
Right.
Hypervigilance.
Right. So anyway, if you're on one of our platforms pages and you see one of our videos, please share. Share it with your friends. Share it with your coworkers. Share it with your teens. You know, if you think it's good information that people should know, why not spread the news?
Yeah, and could be a really good conversation starter.
Yeah, there's that too. All right, so we are going to talk today about maintaining skills. Is that an accurate description?
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Okay. When we were talking yesterday about what we wanted to talk about today, something that came up while Evelyn was giving us her ideas is when it comes to maintaining anything, there ain't no mountain high enough. In other words, there is no peak.
Right.
And, you know, so we're going to kind of go through some steps with this. We're going to talk about like the idea that there is no one and done when it comes to training. In other words, if you buy a gun, it's not enough just to have the gun. There, you need to learn how to use the gun, and you
Right.
need to keep your skills up, right?
Right. Yeah.
Then we're going to talk about what could happen if you're not maintaining skills.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And finally, what's needed to keep your skills up.
Right.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So the first thing we have on our list to talk about is self-deception about skills. I've heard this referred to as the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is an effect of I've heard this referred to as the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias that we have about ourselves when we have limited competence in a particular domain and overestimate our own abilities. So, for example, if you think about the whole idea of owning a gun as a particular means of self-defense, if you have a gun but you don't have any training, you may say to yourself, well, I just have to point and shoot, right? It's not that simple.
No.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things to take into account if you're going to shoot a gun at
Right.
something, right? There's wind, there's environment, there's knowing if the gun is working or not, keeping
Right.
it clean. There's all sorts of things you have to know in order to keep a weapon that's actually going to be effective
Right.
should you need it.
Yeah.
As we're using a gun as an example, I think having control of it is the most important thing. If you don't shoot it enough or practice enough, you're not going to know what to do in the moment. And most guns have some kind of kickback. The force of the bullet leaving the chamber, can hurt you if you're not prepared. And I've watched enough people at shooting ranges and things like that. And they're always surprised by the first few times they shoot it, or maybe the first time, surprised by the kickback. It's not something that they expect to happen. It can be painful at times. So that's one of the things I think about when I think about if I was ever to shoot a gun, which I have no intention of doing, but if I did, knowing how to use it, and like you were saying, Steph, knowing what to do to train yourself and maintain that, because it's a deadly weapon. It's important to be safe with it at all times.
Right. And the whole idea of, let's say I did get a gun and I thought, well, let me go to a few classes and then practice for a little while. And then time goes by and I haven't picked it up. I haven't brushed up on my skills. But I think, well, I took some classes. I should be good, right? But that's a form of self-deception because
Right.
you may or may not,
Right.
have maintained any of that or even, really, it may or may not be there when you need it.
Right. I mean, another thing we could maybe think about and apply this to is getting into what's popularly known as street fights.
Right.
Like, you may think, well, I'll just swing back and hit somebody in the face, and that'll be that, right? I think the favorite hit, or strike, punch, whatever, in the street is the haymaker.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a lot that goes into an effective strike. There's timing, distancing, rotational power, mass times acceleration or force.
Right.
That you have to know if you're going to hit somebody, you're going to want to make it effective, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because if you're doing it in self-defense, you don't want to just keep fist fighting somebody. You want to hit them once, maybe twice, and get out of there.
Right. Enough to stop it and leave. Yeah.
Right. So, you can't learn. Nobody's born inherently knowing how to do that.
Right.
You have to learn it.
Right.
And just because you're a guy or because you work at a gym or because you're somebody who wrestled with their siblings or whatever, it doesn't mean that you automatically know how to do something.
Right.
And overestimating your ability in that thing is creating a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people take it for granted that they can protect themselves if it came down to it. They think they would know what to do. But in our experience, often panic will set in before anything else will, and fear,
Right.
which can stop you from even trying to defend yourself or keep yourself safe.
Right.
And that's why training is so important, because that trains your brain and your body to not panic and to know what to do in the moment, as
Right.
opposed to just to believing you can do it. Or like you were saying about a gun, take a couple classes and I'm good to go. And it's not how it works at
Yeah.
all.
Especially if you've never had any pressure training. It's easy to be overconfident when you've never actually had to use whatever skills you've acquired in a situation.
Right.
It could be a whole different ball of wax.
Right, because your brain is and your body is wired to respond automatically in a specific way to threats.
Right.
It's built in, and you have to train yourself to not respond that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen just because you think of it,
Right.
right?
And you also can't maintain it just over time if you only do it a couple of times.
Right. So let's say you've gone beyond self-deception. Let's say you get to a place where, or at least deception in, I don't need training. or I don't need to practice this, right?
Right.
Let's say you've gotten past that and you've done what you suggested. You go to some classes, you figure out how to defend yourself with your fists or with a gun or some other means, right? And you'll say you do it for a period of time, but then you never go back. What could happen?
Well, you create neural pathways when you're learning something new, and if you don't reinforce those, you will forget how to do it because it has to be established, and then to maintain that, you have to keep going. It's like eating. You can't eat enough for tomorrow. It just doesn't work that way. You have to eat every single day. Not to say you have to train every single day, but you have to train on a consistent basis so that that is in your mind and your body knows what to do without panicking or freaking out. Even if you do panic or freak out, you could still know what to do by continuing to train and creating those neural pathways and settling them into your mind so you don't have that problem.
Yeah. So the whole idea of what could happen, I was thinking, in some ways, it's worse to have a little bit of training. Because I think somebody who just buys a gun may know, like, yeah, I really should get some classes. I really should do something. But if you've gotten some training, you have this false sense of confidence, the whole Dunning-Kruger thing. And when it comes down to it, it's just not going to be there. Or it might be, but you're not doing it in a way that's effective because you haven't actually put it in, like Rochelle was saying, you haven't actually put it into your body where that's the automatic response.
Right. I was thinking of you guys probably remember this, when we were kids, the schools would regularly make us do bus drills and fire drills, right?
Yep.
Why were they bothering to drill us? And what should be, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? It should be something you can do, just walk out of the school when it's on fire.
Right.
Why would they bother to drill us for that? Like, it would seem normal and natural to want to walk away from danger, but it looks like you want to say something, Rochelle. Go for it.
I was thinking back to like first grade and being taught to walk in an orderly fashion, and all through grade school and junior high and high school. And then we got to high school, I think, or junior high was like civil defense drills became a part of it as well. And that was ingrained in me from a very, very young age to not go completely bonkers and everybody run out in chaos, but everybody's scared because there's a fire. And I've actually experienced that in high school. We had a fire in our shop and we had to leave the building. And it keeps the crowd under control and keeps order as much as we possibly can. And that's the point of being trained and drilled to do that.
Because the natural response is to panic.
Right.
Right.
And what happens when we panic? We kind of forget all about taking care of other people.
Right.
Yep.
People get trampled to death in panic because everybody's not paying attention to anybody else besides themselves, or maybe their families.
Right.
Yeah. So learning how to not panic and how to walk from point A to point B so that everybody gets there safely has to be drilled.
Right.
Yeah. And that way it's already in place. And you just know, okay, you hear that sound. I remember I can still hear the sound of the fire alarm. I think most of us can say fire alarm. There it is. And what do? You get in line and you just walk. You follow the teacher and you go where the teacher's leading you.
Right. Yeah. So I think the point is that if, let's say, they taught us in kindergarten how to do that, but never brought it up again and never had us drill again, we would probably forget.
Right.
Because it's not being ingrained. It's not building up. I think even now, if I was in a building and I heard a fire alarm, my first instinct would be to look around for somebody in charge and follow them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too, like if they didn't continue to work on it, the teacher also wouldn't continue to work on it. Now she's responsible for a class of, say, 30 kids. What happens if she's freaking out?
Right.
So
That's a good point. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not, saying like, even now as a 50-some-year-old woman, if I heard a fire alarm, my first instinct would be to look. It isn't because I learned it in kindergarten. It's because it was drilled into me repeatedly over time. Now, have I lost some fire drill skills? Probably, because I'm not being asked to file out the door in an orderly fashion on a
Right.
regular basis. I'm not in
Right.
school anymore.
Right.
I'm not an employee, because I think there was even some at workplaces I've been in where they regularly practiced, you know, fire drills.
Right.
That was
Yep.
a thing at workplaces. So,
Mhm.
but I do recognize the fact that I probably would feel some panic,
Right.
even though
Yeah.
my brain's like, oh, look for teacher. The rest of me is going, panic, 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 fire.
Definitely.
You know, because that's what we're wired to do.
Right. And what happens if you're the one in charge?
Exactly.
I
So-
vote for teacher. I am teacher.
Yeah.
I am the adult. Oh no.
So I think the last point on this is that things can change and probably will.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Because we, going back to the example of, I learned this in school, and now I'm an adult and I've been out of school for 30 plus years. That's one of the things that have changed.
Mhm.
I'm not in the workforce right now. So for me, the skills have diminished because something has changed.
Yeah.
And it probably will. You can't, you're not going to be able to go get in your closet in your room and stay there and then nothing's ever going to happen.
Right.
You're not going to be the same person you were 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you think about even just moving from a house in the country to an apartment in the city, or
Right.
vice versa.
Right.
It's a different set of challenges, a different set of strategies. So.
Right. And developing strategies in the new environments or in the new circumstances requires continuous training.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right. So we're going to move on to the next point, which is what can happen if you don't maintain whatever it is you need to maintain. So if we're going back to the gun example, right? We've talked about how you buy a gun, you go to a few classes, and then we're saying you need to keep training with it on a regular basis. It, like that Rochelle said, doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't even have to be every week, but maybe every month.
Right.
Yeah.
Renew your skills, refresh your skills, maybe learn a new skill. There's things you have to do to maintain your gun so that it actually fires accurately.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even how to use it in a self-defense scenario, you have to train that.
Right.
You're not going to know what to do. And that reminds me of an event, I don't know how long ago, it's been a year or year and a half or 2 years or something like that, where someone came into I think it was a mall with a gun, and there was a young man who was carrying, and he did every procedure correctly and stopped the person with the gun. But it's because he was training
Right.
and he was
Right.
able to be
Mhm.
accurate with what he needed to do to stop that person. He did everything correctly because he kept training, and that's kind of what keeps coming to mind.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
If you simply had the gun, and let's say we do what Evelyn suggested, you go to a few classes, but then you stopped. If you're in panic mode, you might not remember what you're
Yeah,
supposed to do. I
right.
think Rochelle brought this up. You won't remember, and you are now in danger.
Right.
And there's a time frame. There's, so to speak, a clock is ticking. You can't just go, let's see, what did I learn?
Yeah.
What was the angle? What's the distancing again?
Mm-hmm.
You think about time really is of the essence in a lot of these situations where you have to act. And what's going to be there for you when you act,
Right.
when you have to act, and especially if you have others who are counting on you.
Right. Wow, we're running out of time. We're really talky today.
Yeah. So much good stuff.
Yeah. So, one of the other issues with what could happen if you don't maintain something is you can't effectively protect yourself or those you care about.
Right.
And even to a higher degree than protecting yourself is protecting your loved ones. What if you have your kids with you
Right.
Mm-hmm.
and you can't stop what's happening? And how do I want to phrase this? You could do something about it if you had the training, but you can't because you don't.
Right.
Yeah. And there's no time to get it. At this point, you just have to do something. And, what are the odds you're going to do the right thing?
Right, right. Yeah. And the odds are diminished.
Yeah.
It's not in your favor at this point.
And that's what makes this so important to think about and to actually start to apply, because the cost of not doing it needs to become unacceptable.
Right. Right.
The whole point of training is to minimize the damage as much as you can. That's the point of it, and to be safe as you can. If you're panicking, it will inevitably make things worse, and the damage will be much greater.
Right.
For example, if there's a fire in a house and the family's in there and no one knows what to do, or they've never created some sort of evacuation system and they have small children, it could be worse. It could be so much worse if they train their kids and themselves. When we have a fire, this is what we do.
Right.
And you don't think about that until the moment comes, and then you've got, your house is not as important as your family. You can always buy another house. You can't replace your family.
That's right. Yeah. So, one last thing about this particular point is if you had a little bit of training and something bad happens to you, you might become disillusioned at that point about whatever skills you thought you had and just want to give up.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a really hard place to be.
Yeah. It's really hard to be in that place and to want to have done something different, but didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to pick yourself back up and go back to what you probably needed to be doing already.
Right.
So what do we need to maintain? I mean, we've kind of said it framing it in the more negative aspect of, what could happen and stuff. But what's a more positive side of what we need to do to maintain a skill?
I think an important place to start is to assess, where am I with these things? And then accept, well, let's say I took some classes. Let's say I do have some ideas about how to defend myself, but I really haven't brushed up on any of them. I can say, well, here's where I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm accepting the reality of where I am right now and not going into you should be this and this and this. Just no, I'm here now. What can I do today?
Yeah. It's a humility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Not letting your ego dictate to you what you actually can do.
Right.
Accepting that there's things you need to learn and things you need to practice.
And being open to continuing to be taught, even if you are maybe an expert or close to an expert, having a beginner's mind, as we talk about in our martial art, and being willing and open to learning, no matter where you are in your training, because there can be something that changes, technology, what have you, depending on the situation, that you don't know about yet. And I think that goes with the humility thing, is being open to learning and continuing to train, and not assuming that you know because you've been doing it for a long time.
Right. Having that continual learning, there's always something new. I can always do a little better. I can always tweak the skills I have, learn new skills, and just continue and understand that. I think the acceptance idea is understanding that, yeah, this will be my whole life. And it's going to change as I get older. I'm going to have to strategize a little differently, when I'm in my 80s. But it's going to continue the rest of our lives.
Yeah. I've heard stories. I haven't actually met anybody like this yet, but I've heard stories of, grandmasters saying things like, in a martial art, saying things like, I'm only just beginning, or I still have so much to learn. Even after 40, 50 years of training, they don't see themselves as experts or that they have nothing else to learn.
Yeah.
They see themselves as needing to continue to hone their skills and continue to hone their training because they just haven't quite reached perfection, which, perfection is unattainable.
Right.
Let's just be real.
Let's just be realistic here.
But you can strive for perfection in the sense of continuing to hone whatever skill you have and getting better at doing whatever it is you're doing so that should you need that skill, it won't be that big of a deal for you to do it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I feel like is a good mindset to have is, I think the 2 points we have are kind of the same: consistency and showing up for your skill, and not accepting complacency.
Right.
Because if you're complacent, you won't show up.
Right.
Right. So if you accept your own complacency, then you won't be consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to do away with complacency, and you have to decide to be consistent.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, consistency doesn't necessarily mean you're 100% there or 100% perfect all the time.
Mhm.
Consistency means you just don't stop.
Right. And I think accepting that some days it's going to be harder, some days
Mhm.
it's going to be easier, but no matter what, I keep going and I keep learning and I keep doing this because it's worth it.
Yeah, because some seasons in life you might be able to show up less than other seasons in life.
Like major abdominal surgery, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that's become my lifestyle.
But you're continuing to train at some level. You can mentally train.
Right. I've been working on my training while I've been down by listening to podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
watching videos, reading articles, that kind of thing. I'm still training, even if I'm not actually physically doing anything.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the consistency part. It's not that I've, went and had surgery and completely gave up.
Right.
It's that I just set aside certain things for now and moved into other things to keep the training going.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the last point: making learning skills a lifestyle. Like, what does that mean?
I think it goes back to the whole idea of being open to learning and not being arrogant about it, but accepting it fully into your life as part of your identity to be someone that people can rely on in a dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about particularly about safety, and people will trust you because they know you know what you're doing. Because not everybody wants to train to be a martial artist or self-defense or learn how to shoot a gun. But
Mm-hmm.
those that are willing to do that are usually the ones people look to for help.
Mm-hmm.
And having that control over your mind and your body keeps other people calm. So there's all sorts of effect by you consistently training. You can keep a crowd under control, keep your family safe. There's all kinds of things you can do just by maintaining your training.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think when we're talking about lifestyles, we're talking about the consistency aspect of making it a part of your life. This is what I do.
Yes, that's the phrase I was thinking. It's not, I got to figure out where I'm going to add this. It's kind of like if I identify as a runner, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I train, I run, right? So
Right.
if I am someone who is working to protect, it's what I do. So of course I'm going to do it.
Right. Right. So that means that you're going to incorporate it into your life.
Yeah.
And you're going to make it a habit.
Right.
And it's going to matter to you that you show up.
Right. So it's not optional.
Right.
The decision's already made.
Right. You make it not optional by deciding
Right.
to make it a lifestyle point.
Yep.
I was finished up a few weeks ago a show called Suits.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, I like to call it lawyers yelling at each other. Because that's pretty much what they do the entire show. One lawyer is yelling at another lawyer about something. But something I found interesting was one of the main characters, Harvey, had a consistent lifestyle of showing up at the gym to box. Harvey was able to, use his skill when he needed to because he consistently showed up at the gym.
Right.
Now, I'm sure part of the reason the character was doing that was stress release.
Yeah.
But also, if you learn how to hit things, you're able to hit things.
Right.
Right.
It's a side benefit to this stress reducing activity. But even still, like one of the other characters, Lewis, got mugged. So he regularly started getting self-defense training from one of the other lawyers who was also into boxing. But I think she had other skills too. So he was able to defend himself if that ever happened again.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't just get a couple lessons from this lawyer and then moved on. He just kept doing it.
Right.
And, that despite the fact that lawyers were always yelling at each other in the show, I enjoyed that aspect of it because even though sometimes these people were shady, they had somewhat consistent characteristics. I think that's one of the benefits of shows like that is that the characters are more consistent to real humans.
Yeah.
Than some idealized versions of characters and other things. But the fact that, they had consistent skills meant something. And it was because they valued making it a part of the lifestyle. They valued humility.
Right. Yes.
Although that's ironic with a bunch of lawyers.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole idea
on TV, I should say. I don't know what real life lawyers are like. I'm talking about the TV lawyers.
I met some pretty good ones. But anyway, right. But that whole idea of it's just that important. So I'm going to make it part of my life. Yeah. I'm going to keep it fresh because you just never know.
Right.
And what if you never need it? Great. But what if you need it? I want to make sure it's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say to people I'm training in self-defense, I hope you never need to use this.
Right.
Yeah. Let's make sure we keep the skill.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. So, all right. So, again, look for our reels and clips and things on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok of our safety tips. Share them with your friends and family. Also, we hope that you enjoyed our podcast and you learned something today. And we look forward to being with you next time. Have a good one.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.